Hello, this is Bad Vibes, and before I start the video, I would like to thank everyone that has supported me over the last few months. It means the world to me. All the nice comments make me want to make another video, so thank you. Also, if you're new to this channel, hit that subscribe button. And to all my viewers, I will continue to work to get better. There's still a lot of things I need to improve on, and I'm working on it. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. I'll say it right now. I grew up in a broken home. Dad drank, Mom drank. That might be why I never touched a drop, but I'm getting on a tangent here. Most of you already know where the story is going. Dad used to get drunk and blame Mom and I for all of his problems. Mom would lock me in my room while he would do what aggressive drunks do while they're upset. I'd say more often than not my mother's screams and my own sobs would rock me to sleep. My mom started drinking and became numb to the whole thing. First, Dad kept hitting her and left me crying in my room. I guess he got bored eventually. 3 days after my 5th birthday, Dad came into my room for the first time. He had never done that before. Mom had stopped him. He broke my nose that first night. We went to the hospital and I told the doctor I fell down the stairs. He seemed to believe me. It was like clockwork after that. Mondays, Dad worked late and we rested. Tuesday nights and Thursday nights, he was in the bar until well after my bedtime. Wednesdays were the worst. Fridays were normally insults and occasional slap. Weekends, he drank himself to sleep around 4 in the afternoon. But Wednesdays, he'd come up to my room to do his business. If I blocked the door, it was a dozen rounds with a belt. If I cried, it was a slap for every tear. But if I was quiet and let his knuckles crack against my jaw and let him pull my short hair, I'd never have to make up stories at school. I was an adventurous boy and no one looked twice when my hands were scraped or I had a bruise on my cheek. I lived for 2 years fearing that one night Dad would hit me too hard and I'd end up with the angels. Death scared me. One Wednesday, I was sitting in the corner when I saw him, a tall man in my corner. At first, I thought it was a woman. It looked like a black dress fell from a black face. I realized at that moment it was a robe, a cloak, but I never learned that word until years later. I knew what I was looking at. I had watched TV. I had read books. I knew what death was supposed to look like, but I didn't cry. Dad would come in, I'd get the belt, and death would take me away. But for all the pain in my life, I knew that I wanted to live. That night I fell asleep on the floor, huddled in the corner of the room with a halo of moonlight coming through the window, resting around my feet. Death simply stood in the darkest corner of my room, behind the door leading to the hall. He was there every bad night after, always Wednesdays, some Fridays when my dad was in his worst mood. Every night he got closer. After 2 months, he would sit on the toy box at the end of my bed, sitting with his back against the wall, turned sideways so I could always see the profile of his shadowy hood. "Why are you here?" I asked him one night. He stared at me from the position, knees pressed to his chest, and arms curled around his shins, almost in a fetal position. Though there was no fear in the position, just boredom. "To watch," he told me. I had expected a quiet rasp, like on TV. Death's voice was something more. It was a burly man's confident and strong. It was a caring mother's nurturing tone, a madman laugh, and a child giggle. It disturbed me and comforted me at the same time. "To watch what?" I asked. He simply looked at me. I saw his eyes for the first time that night. I had always expected a soulless pit there. Instead, I found blue orbs in a bleached skull. The orbs held galaxies, internal and non-existent. Everything and nothing lived in the shadows of his cloak. Those contradictions comforted me. "Over you, child," Death responded. I thought he lied to me, and I grew upset. I asked him why he never stopped my father. "It's not my place to intervene," he told me. I asked him what he meant. He told me he couldn't stop my father if he tried. He simply was there to guide me if my nightmare ever came true. After that night, Death was more of a father to me in the way my own never was. The next week he brought a thick, leather-bound book. Within were fairy tales, dark and light themes, in countless languages. He told me stories in the voice of my grandmother, who died when I was 4. When I got older, he stopped bringing the book. We stayed up until the crack of dawn talking. I asked him about the afterlife and why things were the way they were. He always answered vaguely, telling me I'd understand one day. He stayed with me and comforted me until dawn peeked over my neighbor's roof. Then the sunlight would touch his black robe, turning it into a blinding white. Then he was gone. He'd be back next week, and I'd get ready for school. I never tired when Death spoke to me. Life went on. When I was 12, my doctor fixed my nose for the 3rd time and started asking questions. Within 3 weeks, I was taken from that home and put into an orphanage. In a Hollywood moment, my family doctor, who had heard about what had been happening from a friend at the hospital, adopted me. He and his wife had been trying for a child for years, but they never did. I lived a happy life after that. I never forgot what happened to me in my youth, though. I followed in my new father's footsteps and became a physician. Sadly, jobs were tight, and I took a role in the morgue. All those years around Death helped me work out my new job, and I enjoyed it. My heart broke when my adopted mother was in an accident. I was the one that put the toe tag on her. I had to take the rest of the week off, but Death was there that day. He stood in the corner of the storage room when I closed the drawer. Holding his skeleton hand was a little girl with green eyes and chocolate hair. I had seen her in my mother's family pictures and knew this was her, around 7 years old. It hurt me, but Death nodded to me, and I knew he was going to take care of her. In my lifetime, I've closed that drawer on 4 parents. Dad drove into the storefront while driving drunk. I had to leave the room when they wheeled him in. Would have spat on his cold husk of a body if I didn't. Mom drank herself into an early grave a year later. I pitied her when I closed the drawer. He had broken her soul and she died in pain. Though my mother left the morgue the same way my adopted mother did, I still remember the screams when Death dragged my father through the floor, the red-hot chain and metal collar strapped around his neck. My father, the man that saved my life, died 4 years ago. He went quickly in his sleep. I volunteered to close the drawer on him. When I did, Death arrived and took the little boy with the dark hair and blue eyes. You may wonder why I'm writing this. In truth, I'm not quite sure myself. I guess I wanted to tell people not to fear Death. He's a gentle being with a crappy job, and he saved my life. With the life he gave me, I married. I've raised 3 children, 2 girls and a boy who look just like their mother. I have 9 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren, with a 3rd on the way. I lost my wife a year ago to a heart attack. It hurts me to think about it, but I know she didn't fear death. She knew my story, the one I'm telling you now. She went in her sleep, holding my hand. As I write these final thoughts, I look to my window. Out there I see a figure in the street, snow blowing white on black robes. A moment ago I opened the window to invite him in. When you live as long as I have, you learn to treat guests right. Now he's standing in the corner, patient as the day I met him. When I'm done with this post, I'm going to turn off my laptop, put the little girl he brought with him on my lap and close my eyes. My wife will close her brilliant blue eyes and rest her crimson locks on my chin. I'll take one breath and fall asleep. When I wake up, I'll be with my family. I'll see my mother and father again. I'll see my mom, happier than she was in life. I'll see the 4 dogs I had in my lifetime too, hopefully. Mortimer, death calls from the corner. I sigh and type faster. If I can say one last thing, I'd like to quote Blue Oyster Cult, "Don't fear the Reaper," because after all, people are the real monsters. I grew up with a healthy fear of clowns, I'd say. Could have been because of Stephen King. Could have been because of John Wayne Gacy. Could have just been because they're fucking creepy looking. My family has never let me live this down, so it shouldn't have been much of a surprise to me when I walked into our house one day to see a 7-foot animatronic clown peering at me from the corner of our living room. A sign hung around his neck that read, "Free hugs." I felt my eyebrows scrunched together in disgust and walked off to bed. It was too late for me to be dealing with this. The following morning I was startled awake by a high pitch and crazed laughter. For a moment I felt my legs seize up before remembering. I walked into the room to see my 18-year-old sister, Lily, stepping on a little pad connected to the clown and giggling as it reached out its robotic arms out to pretend to grab her. She noticed me and giggled even harder. "I got him at the Halloween store." "Yippee," I said as I peered over to the frozen figure towering over us both. "His name is Giggles. Dad said we're going to move him to your room once Halloween is over." She smirked. I did not. She left for work quickly after and told me to have fun with Giggles, once again breaking out into laughter. I didn't study him too hard last night, but now I stepped back and really noticed his face. My legs once again started to feel tense. His eyes were yellow, almost cat-like, with purple diamond makeup surrounding them. A goofy white smile permanently painted on. Wild hair to match the purple and bloodied outfit he had on. A fake deck of cards rested in his pocket. Other than his eyes, his face looked weirdly human. Usually the animatronics you see in haunted houses and Halloween stores just resemble giant, kind of creepy dolls. But Giggles looks like he walked straight out of a freak show and into my home. I chalked it up to the advancement in technology and went back to bed. I dreamed of Giggles snapping my spine, my body broken, mangled mess, his smile still frozen. I woke up to laughter once again. This time I sighed. Was this gonna be the new routine? Mom was in the living room, reading on the couch. I sat down next to her, and without looking up she said, "This stupid thing has gone off on its own twice since I got out here." Haha, I muttered, thinking she was just teasing me. As soon as the sarcastic laugh had left my mouth, Giggles' yellow eyes lit, and his arm stretched forward. "Oh, you think you're a little fast? I'll get you next time," followed by the same laugh I'd been woken up to twice earlier. I noticed Mom shoot me her "I told you so" look at the corner of my eye, but I remained fixated on Giggles. Do animatronics' mouths usually open and form words so perfectly? Maybe he's on a motion sensor. I walked over and swung my arms a few times. Nothing other than how his eyes seemed to follow my arms. I looked over at Mom and frowned, thinking about how I already want to get rid of this stupid thing. No, Lily bought that pad thing, so she didn't need to turn the sensors on. I was still skeptical, or maybe I just wanted Mom to be wrong. I reached behind Giggles to take a look for wires connected to him and saw there wasn't. Motion sensors were off. As soon as I let go of Giggles, the yellow eyes flared up and the robotic arms reached out. One caught my arm, then I felt a light squeeze as the clown yelled, "Come a little closer, I've got games and hugs." I gasped and jumped back as he gleefully laughed, then went back to his normal stance. I stood there feeling as stiff as Giggles was until I heard my mom laugh. "You don't like clowns, huh?" I glared at her as I started back towards my room. I heard Giggles laughing as I closed my door. Ever since Giggles moved into the living room, my cardiac rhythm seemed to be the only thing that hadn't been waking me up. This time, it wasn't laughter, it was my dog. My eyes fluttered open, hearing a slight whimper in my ear. My 110-pound St. Bernard was staring back at me, her weapon of a tail whipping my legs with every wag. "What you doing, bub?" Charity usually only sleeps in my mom's room, but anytime she hears something that scares her, it's in my bed she ends up in. This particular night, the sound happened to be thunder. As lightning broke through the heavy clouds and briefly lit up my room, I pat her head. Thunder cracked again, and when my room lit up this time, I noticed something in my mirror. I grabbed a flashlight on my nightstand. I squinted as my eyes adjusted and noticed my reflection twist its face in horror. Written on the wall behind my bed in purple letters, "Come a little closer." Thunder loudly filled my ears, as well as laughter from the other room. Maybe it wasn't the storm that scared my dog. The next few days came and went. There were small things happening that only I seemed to notice. One morning I noticed Giggle's white gloves were splattered with what looked like to be dried blood. Later I found a mutilated dead bird on our deck. The next day, Giggles was facing a little bit more to the right than usual, and I found a Joker card sitting on my bed later on. Giggles constantly went off on his own. I thought I was going crazy, but that didn't stop me from constantly feeling on edge. Then Friday came, date night for my parents. Lily was working the third shift. I was alone. Well, I was with Giggles. 10 o'clock came. I kept Charity in my room, not because she was scared, but because I was. Laughter erupted from the living room a couple of times, and I shivered. I turned up the volume on my TV. 11:30. More laughter. Closer this time. Then again, right outside my door. I held my breath. Charity was fast asleep under my bed. I listened. Silence. Then I heard scratching. Come a little closer. Voice was not a usual one, but it was quieter, teasing me. I fumbled around my bed trying to find my phone. I texted my mom and told her to call 911. Then I reached for the nightstand drawer. The scratching turned to knocking, and I searched frantically for anything I could use as a weapon. Come a little closer, little closer. Giggles snickered. I found a pocket knife. I clutched it tightly. Giggles was now pounding on my door, the knob rattling viciously as he howled with his wild laughter. If you don't come closer, I will. Then nothing. The door stopped shaking. The knob sat still. Charity was now sitting at the foot of my bed, the hair on her neck standing. I didn't dare move. Suddenly, the door broke off its hinges, collapsing loudly against my floor. I cried out loudly in fright as I stared straight into hollow yellow eyes. He stood there, not moving, just smiling and staring. But this wasn't his normal robotic position. He was alive. He was staring me down. He was gonna kill me. His lips formed a pout, though his makeup still rested in his ugly grin. What's the matter? You don't want a hug? His shrieking laugh pierced my ears. Charity let out a low growl. That's when he barreled towards me. His already bloody gloves grabbed a hold of my arm. He leaned in close. His eyes burned. My heart was beating so hard, I thought I'd break my ribs. Now we can play a game. We'll see how much of you breaks before you die. I heard it before I felt it, the crunch that could have been a tree branch being stepped on, but instead it was my arm being snapped. The pain radiated through my body and I screamed. I couldn't hear myself over Giggles laughing out of joy. I stared down at my bone, broken and jutting out of my body, blood soaking my sheets and dripping on my carpet. Giggles had left what looked to be a burn in the shape of his hands on my skin. I cried, paralyzed. That's when Charity jumped. I went to yell out to her, not wanting her to meet the same fate, but she caught Giggles by surprise, clamping down on his shoulder and ripping his arm right out of the socket. It dropped heavily on the floor, and Charity barked as sirens could be heard wailing in the distance. Giggles started towards Charity, then stopped and looked at me instead. His mouth curled into a horrible smile, and he said, "Don't worry. I'll keep close. We can finish the game soon." He ran out of my room, and I saw blue and red flashing lights coming outside my window a few minutes later. Giggles was never found. The police probably thought I was crazy, my family too, but no one ever said anything. After all, how could you explain the burn marks on my arm, the broken bone, my dog refusing to leave my side, and the robot's lifeless arm beside her? Charity sleeps by me every night now, and no one has ever brought a clown into our house ever since, which is weird because sometimes I do hear one giggling. The story I'm about to tell you took place when I was only a teenager. I lived with my family. It was me, my two parents, my brother and sister, and my grandmother. I had a younger sister too, but she and my grandfather both died in a car accident several years earlier. We moved houses not long after. Our new house was much bigger. I think having a smaller, cozier house would have let us feel their absence too easily. In a larger home, we could just dismiss their absence as being in another room, even if we knew they weren't. Anyway, one Halloween, our whole family, minus Grandma, gathered in the living room where we had lit a fire and put a movie on for the evening. It was late and trick-or-treaters started to thin out. The movie was a bit of a lull when we heard a shriek from upstairs. Instantly we knew it was my grandma who had screamed, so we ran up in a panic. As we climbed the stairs, we could hear her sobbing and saying, "It's you. It's really, really you." She kept repeating it in a kind of hoarse cry as we made our way to her room. She had fallen down onto the floor with her back against the wall. She looked paler than any of us had ever seen her before. Tears streaked her face, and her breath was ragged, but her expression was a mixture of bliss and excitement. Standing across the room, dressed in an old-fashioned suit with a hat in his hands, stood my grandfather. I'm sure I don't have to tell you how stunned we were. None of us were particularly superstitious, and even if we were, this was just not the sort of thing you would ever expect to come across. Had I known what I know now, I would have ordered him out of our house that very minute, but I didn't. My mom was the first one to break down. Soon her father again brought her tears immediately. My grandfather simply smiled and reassured her. We spoke for what felt like hours, hearing the story of how Grandma was in her room getting ready for bed when she heard tapping on the window. When she turned, she saw the face there, peeking in at her. She explained this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. When you lose someone, you see them everywhere. But when he didn't leave and motioned her over to the window, then climbed in once she had, Grandma knew this wasn't the same. That's when she screamed, and we came in. After that, my grandfather regaled us with tales of the other side, how beautiful it is, how all of your wildest dreams can't compare to the reality of it. I'd like to tell you that's when I was skeptical, but I was just happy to see my grandpa once again. He explained how, when the time is right, spirits can come back to the land of the living, and there's so much superstition and rituals going on during Halloween that the barrier between the worlds grew thin. He apologized for not visiting sooner, claiming he had tried many times, but that he simply hadn't been experienced enough until this year, and we believed him. Once all of this was finished, we agreed that it was best if we left my grandparents alone to catch up. Grandpa stood up, turned to my grandmother, and reached out his hand. "I've got a lot to tell you. Come with me." He smiled as he said this, a warm, friendly smile. She took his hand, and together they walked down the hall and out of sight. The rest of us went back downstairs, still shaken up by what had occurred. We spent a long time in silence there, by the fire. Trick-or-treaters would stop by even more infrequently than before. Eventually, we got back to talking and joking, almost though there wasn't a ghost upstairs. It was the best night we spent together in years. Mom was just telling us the story about Grandpa when he was her age, when the doorbell rang again. It was going on 11 o'clock, so we weren't expecting any more children. A cry of "trick or treat" came from outside of the door, so my mom stopped the story and went to the door. My mom loved children. She peeked out the front door window and just got a glimpse of a young girl standing out there in a pink princess outfit. She swung the door open, not even waiting to get a full view of the girl before complimenting her costume. "Well, don't you look adorable." Then there was the sound of the bowl hitting the floor. My mother froze mid-sentence. "What's wrong, Mommy?" The voice didn't come from any of us. It came from outside. My father, my older siblings, and I looked at each other before racing to the front door. When we got there, my heart leaped into my throat, and tears filled my eyes. Standing in the doorway was my younger sister, Sarah. Sarah, who had been killed in the car crash years earlier. Those of you who have shared a house with a young child can imagine how deeply their absence is felt. There's no aspect of life they don't affect in one way or another. And when she died, nothing was the same. And there she stood, not a day older, not a mark on her body. I broke down crying. When I looked around, I saw that all of my family was crying, and Sarah looked deeply troubled by it. "Did I do something wrong, Mommy?" "Of course you didn't, sweetie," my mother replied hurriedly, adding, "We just miss you. Can I come in now?" We let her in, of course. The family then talked as we hadn't in years. Sarah was just the same as she had been ever. Back then, I would have called her annoying, but that night she couldn't have annoyed me if she tried. Once we had been together for a half an hour or so, Sarah looked towards my parents. "Mom, Dad, can I show you something?" "Of course you can, honey," my mother said. She still had tears in her eyes. Sarah leapt off the couch. "Great, come with me," she said, holding out both her hands for my mother and father to take. Suddenly, I realized my grandma was still upstairs, and she had no idea that Sarah had came back, so we went upstairs to get her. I got upstairs. I saw my grandfather coming out of the room quietly and shutting the door behind him. When I asked him where Grandma was, he told me that she was resting. I asked if she could come downstairs, and he simply said that wasn't possible, before adding that she would have plenty of time to spend with Sarah. I was excited. Did this mean that they were staying with us? I asked my grandfather, and he just smiled and went downstairs with me. My older siblings were chatting in the living room when Sarah came skipping in from around the corner alone. "Where's Mom and Dad?" I asked. "Well, when we went down to the basement, they started kissing and hugging and told me to go upstairs, so I did." That didn't sound right. I couldn't imagine my mother leaving Sarah's side for a moment tonight. Nobody else seemed to find this strange, though. Grandpa just laughed and said that adults were weird and I would understand someday. Then he turned to my brother and said he had brought a gift with him, something to make up for all the lost birthdays and Christmases. He held out his hand for my brother to take. "Come with me." It was only at that point I grew suspicious. I asked my grandpa where the gift was, to which he simply replied, "Oh, don't you worry, you'll get yours soon enough." I urged my brother not to go with him, but he didn't listen. Taking my grandfather's hand, and the two of them went down the hall together. Sarah turned to us and said, "Mommy and Daddy have been down there for a while. Let's go check on them." She reached out for Meg. "Come with me." My older sister reached for Sarah, and I slapped her hand away. "Billy, what the?" "Don't go with her," I begged. "Come on, Meg," Sarah said. "Billy just doesn't want to see Mom and Dad kissing." Before I could stop her, Meg took Sarah's hand, and the two of them went downstairs to the basement. Grandpa started coming back alone. His eyes met mine. "I've got your gift ready now, Billy. Come with me." I ran past him into the room, shut the door behind me. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a cell phone yet, and there was no home phones in my room. They hadn't been openly violent yet, but how long was that gonna last? All I could do was sit there and wait for them to either break in or leave. Heavy footsteps came down the hall and just stopped outside my door. My grandfather began calling me, begging me to come out so he could give me my present. A few minutes later, his voice was joined with Sarah, asking me to come out and play with her. "Why don't you love me anymore, Billy? What did I do wrong?" She sounded like she was on the verge of tears. I can't possibly tell you how hard it was to stay in there, listening to my little sister beg me to play with her one last time. But the survival instinct was a strong one, and I kept the door shut. The clock chimed 12, and all fell silent. I looked under the door, and my grandfather's figure was no longer casting a shadow underneath. I placed my ear to the door, listening carefully. I heard nothing. My family was out there, possibly hurt. I had to go check, or call for help, do something at least. I took a deep breath and steadied myself, and opened the door. The hallway was empty. Across the hall, through the open door, I could see my brother laying there on the ground, motionless. He was pale and didn't look like he was breathing. I was only in high school, but I ran over to him. I checked his wrist and his neck for a pulse, but found nothing. All I saw was that one of his hands was tinged black. I ran upstairs. I should have called the police or an ambulance, or somebody, but my mind wasn't working. I found my grandma in the same state, pale, not breathing, with her hand slightly blackened. My heart was racing. I had to go to the basement, but I couldn't go to the basement because I knew what I would find there. The rest of my family, lying pale and motionless, dead. I sat there for a long time, paralyzed, before I decided I had to know. The descent to the basement felt longer than it ever had before. I felt cold and numb, and each step felt like an eternity. But when I got to the bottom, I saw exactly what I knew I would find. My parents and my oldest sister laying on the floor. I began to cry. Cry like I hadn't done in years. Like I hadn't done since the day my little sister died. "You stupid boy." The voice was sinister and evil sounding, just like every demon from every horror movie you have ever seen, and worse. I spun around, and Sarah was there, but she was different. Her eye sockets were empty. Her mouth was black, lipless hole ringed with fangs. You have no more family, no more loved ones. They are now mine. And you? You will live the rest of your life alone. You will die somewhere forgotten, alone and afraid. You will never see your family again, ever. Then the thing paused and held out its hand. Unless, of course, you come with me. You can be with all of us again, forever. I'd like to tell you now I kept my distance, that I told her to get out of my house, or at least that I sat frozen. But what she said was true. I felt it, deep in my bones. I'll never see my family again if I didn't go with her. I was just a kid, a scared, stupid kid who wanted his mom. I stood shakily and reached out my hand slowly. Sarah's mouth formed a sick smile as I approached. Then there was a noise upstairs. The clock chimed 1 o'clock, and I looked up just for a heartbeat. There was a distant scream, and when I looked forward, Sarah was gone. I called 911. It was eventually deemed that my family died of carbon monoxide poisoning, and that one leak had spontaneously resolved itself and disappeared through my grandma's open window. My experiences were brought on by hysteria and oxygen deprivation. It could have been worse. They could have blamed me. I was legally an adult at that point, so the estate fell to me. I sold the house and everything in it and moved to a small apartment, using the proceeds to put myself through school once I graduated. If you see a loved one who passed away this Halloween, please don't let them in. Don't take their hand, and never go with them. You might be asking why I share this now. It's a fair question. For many years I've been terrified of things that came to my house at night, for decades. I thought that the scariest thing in the world was the idea that whatever came to visit, whatever we had let into my house, they weren't my family. This year, though, I had a thought that was even more disturbing. What if they were? I've been on my knees trying to scrub up all this blood and the scrap of paper for the last half hour. I'm making some progress, but it's slow. I keep having to stop when my hands start to shake too much. I'm out of my apartment for a moment, sitting on the floor in the hallway, and I can feel my nerves settling some. I'm gonna write this out so I have it all recorded, and also so I can wait a bit before having to go back in. It all started when I was bored yesterday. The internet was out at my apartment, and after casting about a couple hours trying to read or do some cleaning, I was out of ideas to entertain myself. That's when I saw a box of stationery on my desk. My Aunt Emma had given me the stationery as a birthday gift the week before, and there was nothing inherently wrong with such a gift. It was a box, high quality paper and envelopes, personalized with my initials at the top of each sheet of paper and on the back fold of the envelopes. As a 70-year-old man, I would have probably thought they were cat's pajamas, but as a 25-year-old man, not so much. But still, I was very bored, so I sat at the desk and started messing around with it. At first I tried writing as neatly and fancy as I knew how. My handwriting was horrible, and my best efforts looked like a slow 4th grader as opposed to a slower 2nd grader. But it was something to do. Then I doodled a bit, but my drawing skills were equally lacking. I was feeling myself get a little drowsy, but then a thought occurred to me of what to do with the stationery. I'd write a letter to myself. It was a stupid idea, but I thought it was kind of funny too. So I took out a clean sheet of paper and set to work. Hey Scott, how are you today? My day is okay but kind of boring. Christine is out of town visiting her parents and the internet is dead. I have zero ideas what to do with myself. This is lame. Goodbye. Sincerely, Scott. The novelty of the idea clearly wore off quickly, but I did fold it up and stick it in an envelope at least, even going as far to address the letter to myself. Standing up from the table with a sigh, I lay down and fairly soon fell asleep. When I woke up, it was early evening and the room was only dimly lit by the fading twilight outside. I reached over and turned my head to the bedside lamp, blinking barely at the brightness. I hated taking naps. I always felt groggy afterwards and had trouble sleeping later in the night. Rubbing my eyes, I rolled discontentedly onto the side and began to get up. When my eyes lit up on the desk, I sat back down. The envelope of the letter I had written was different now. It was in a different spot for one, but I could tell from the bed that it was also a different color and looked like it had a small stain in one corner. Standing up and going to my desk, I looked at the envelope closer before picking it up. My name and address was still in the front, but I hadn't written it smaller and more centered than that. Regardless, the envelope itself was definitely different, so clearly I hadn't written this at all. My next thought was someone came into my apartment to either prank me or try to scare me. The obvious answer was Christine. It didn't seem like something she would do, but she was the only other person with a key. After I did a quick sweep of the apartment for intruders, I texted her. She swore she was still half a state away, and even sent me a picture as proof. She also seemed worried and asked if I had called the cops, but I wasn't at that point yet. I needed to look inside the envelope first. I pried it open carefully and peeked inside, seeing a light blue piece of paper that matched the envelope and was different than the creamed colored paper I had used earlier in the afternoon. When I unfolded it, I was surprised to see that it really did look like my handwriting, but it wasn't the same letter. Instead, it seemed to be responding to me. "Good to hear from you. I've been watching you when I can for years, and it seems like the universe has finally given us a way to talk. But I'm guessing that you're in apartment 3B on Nesbitt Street in Baltimore, right? And your Uncle Tom gave you a box of sanitary for your birthday? It's so weird. I guess things have to line up just right. If this actually works and you're reading this, I know it will probably come as a shock. I don't think your side knows about us like we do you. But that's cool. We can swap stories. I'll keep it short for now, but hope to hear from you soon. Glory and peace, Scott." I read the letter 3 times. I really couldn't tell I didn't write it, other than the contents itself, which was decidedly weird. Whoever was doing this was either a good prankster, or I had a dedicated stalker who had taken time to learn my handwriting. Either way, I was calling its bluff. "Hey man, good to get a response. So are you like me in some other world? That's crazy. Tell me some facts about your world and we can compare. And if you have some kind of souvenir you can send next time, that'd be awesome. Looking forward to your next letter." I put the new letter in an envelope, addressed it, and set it on my desk. I then took out my tablet, plugged it in, and set the camera to record at an angle where I could see the desk and the door to my bedroom. I thought about just sitting there and waiting, but the idea was so tedious and would make it less likely anyone would come back. That was assuming that this wasn't some kind of one-shot joke or harassment. But time would tell. Either way, I decided to go grab something to eat and see a movie. 4 hours later, I returned home to see another blue letter. "I understand you being skeptical, thinking that this is a joke, right? Well, here's some info like you asked, and I sent along something that might help convince you. Our world is a lot like yours, though it's different in some ways. About 40 years ago, we had a lot of animals start dying off. Not all of them, of course, but most of the birds, all the dogs, and a few other species here and there. Still, I don't know why, but around the same time, we lost our mirrors. What I mean is our mirrors stopped showing our reflection. A lot of them just went dark, but some of them, where they have twins in your world, would show us your reflections instead. We knew it was your reflections because all the writing was backwards, and I can tell from your letters you don't actually write backwards anyhow. But after that, a lot of people started changing, getting weird or violent. It's stabilizing some now, but it was really bad when I was younger. A lot of people died. Anywho, like I said, things are better now, though we do have odd stuff pop up and people go missing some. Is your world like that? From what I've seen and what I know of studies people on your side have done observing active mirrors, it seems like things are a lot better over there. If so, I'm kind of jealous. But enclosed you'll find one of our nickels. It's got a President Robert Kennedy on it. He was president from 1969 through 1977. I don't know for sure, but I think I read he's one of the differences between your place and mine. Right back soon. I looked back in the envelope and found a nickel tucked into the corner. One of the sides had the man's profile with the name Robert F. Kennedy listed under it. On the other, it had what looked like a large turkey glowing over a shield bristling with spears and covered with stars and stripes. What the fuck? I remembered my tablet and checked the footage. It had actually stopped recording after 2 hours, but it was enough. At the 42-minute mark, I watched the cream envelope give a shudder and disappear. 30 minutes later, I saw the blue envelope had faded into existence a few inches over my desk. I wasn't sure what to do at this point. I thought about asking Christy for advice, but it would be hard to explain over the phone and I didn't want her to worry. I could call the police, but what good would that do? Even if I showed them the video, they would think it was fake and I was a jackass for wasting their time. I didn't know if I believed everything the letter was saying, but I couldn't deny the evidence was compelling, as if this guy was really another me. It could wind up being something really great. I might even become famous for discovering a parallel dimension. But first things first, I need to write another letter. Wow, this is big news, right? So are you saying you can see me through the mirrors? Well, that's kind of embarrassing. Can you hear us too, or just see us? Do your people have any theories of how this all happened? Have other people in your world had this happen where they can talk to people from my world? I'm very curious, need to know more. This time I watched the letter disappear, only to be replaced by another response a short time later. Yeah, you've got a lot of questions. I understand. No, we can't hear you, just see you. I don't know about anyone actually communicating like this before. No one knows why this world is changing so much. When other things started appearing last year, people said it was the end of the world. They were being judged, but people are just going crazy, you know? I don't believe in all that stuff. Things are changing and we're just gonna have to change with it. Hey, did you say that you have a Christy? Is she that hot blonde girl there too? She's your girlfriend? I didn't like the tone of the new letter, and I had even more questions now. But I wanted to keep him talking, so I tried to respond in a way that would make him happy. Yeah, she's my girlfriend. She's great. We're planning to get married next year. Do you have a Christy too? Tell me more about your world when you can. My letter shuddered away fairly quickly, and I waited for an answer, but none came. It was getting late, so I eventually went to bed, though I would wake up periodically and check the desk. Around 6 in the morning, I saw a blue envelope and jumped out of bed to read the 2 lines that were written there. I do have a Christy, but she's a fucking whore. I had to punish her. Hope yours isn't a whore too. Haha. I was done. I didn't know what this was, but I knew it had to be real, and it was feeling more and more like it was dangerous. Throwing the letter down, I started to look around the room. I saw a small mirror hanging from the back of my closet and yanked it down quickly, hearing it crack when it hit the floor. I tried to think of any others, and the only ones that came to mind were in the bathroom and the one that Christy had hung on the mantle in the living room. Christy! I looked at my phone and saw that it was almost 7. She was going to be back in town this morning, probably coming straight here. I tried calling her, but it went straight to voicemail like it was powered off. I didn't have her parents' number, so I had to resort to leaving a voicemail and a text message telling her not to come by my apartment, that I would meet her at hers when she got back. I debated what to do until she arrived, but ultimately decided I couldn't stand being in the apartment myself, so I left a note on the door saying, Christy, don't go into the apartment. Call me instead. I'll explain and meet you, and left the building. For the next few hours, I basically drove a circuit between our 2 apartments, occasionally parking outside one place or the other. I was sitting outside her place when I got a call from her phone. It was her mother. She said Christy had knocked her phone into the toilet getting ready for bed last night, and they put it in a bowl of rice to dry it out. When Christy left to come back home a few hours ago, she must have forgotten it. I felt my mouth go dry. Her mother was asking me what she should do to get Christy her phone, but I told her I'd have to call her back and hung up. Based on when she left, she should have been back at least an hour at this point. I knew she wasn't at her apartment, so I sped back over to mine. I saw her car parked down the street from my place, and my head started pounding. Running up the stairs, I reached my door and saw the note I had left was gone. In its place was a blue sheet of stationery paper, bearing a drawing of red inked heart and the words "Come on in my handwriting. I started yelling her name as I fumbled to open the door, but as I entered I could tell she wasn't there. The apartment felt empty and lifeless. I ran into the bedroom, stumbling to a stop at the doorway. My mind had difficulty making sense of what it was seeing at first. On the wall next to my desk were 2 strips of paper plastered on the wall, making an outline of a small door. The strips seemed to be some kind of collaboration of blue and cream paper. Speckled here and there were some spots of crimson and soggy near the baseboard where there were partial bloody handprints on both sides, as though someone had been trying to hold on. Leaning away from the paper door, the floor was covered with more blood. As I looked closer, I could see several thick runnels in the wood that I thought at first were scrapes or cuts of some kind by something heavy being drug. But then I saw one of Christy's bloody fingernails, torn off at the nail bed and ragged, jutting out of one of the grooves she had raked into the floor in her fight to get away. I collapsed to the floor and began crying. After a few minutes, I pulled myself together, enough to look around my room for any other clues or some means of helping her. That's when I saw the blue envelope on my desk. She is a hot one, better than mine even, but I could tell that she has some slutty ways. It's in her eyes, but don't you worry, she'll find less tolerance for that over here. And I'll be sure to keep her connected. Don't bother on trying to come across either, bud. I figured out how to do it, but I'm gonna have to keep it close to my vest. I have to apologize for not being completely honest before. Things are worse here than I let on. Maybe this Christy can keep me happy and satisfied with my life, but who's to say? Like I told you, some people are really losing over here. Might be I have to visit again sometime, more permanently. Till then, glory and peace, or as you would say, sincerely, Scott. I know I have no way of getting her back, and I know I can't have her blood being found in my apartment. Even without hard evidence, there will be questions when she's reported missing, but all of that is in the background at the moment. I can't shake the feeling of being watched. I look around and see no one, but then I notice, in the dingy brass door of the elevator across the hall from where I'm sitting, the reflection there is dark and distorted, but I can see myself in it, or at least a version of myself. It looks like me, but I can tell that it isn't, because that version of me is laughing. My friends and I were at our favorite pub last night. Not a fancy place, but you know, cheap beer and close enough to home where I didn't have to drive. The night started off normally enough. The four of us crammed at a small table off in the corner, mostly talking shop and shitting on our boss. Being that it was the middle of the week, there weren't too many other people there. Maybe 8 or 9 others in the whole place. Everyone just keeping to themselves. The sort of people you expect to see in the pub on a Wednesday. Anyway, from where I was sitting, I had a pretty good view of the TV behind the bar. Jesse, the bartender, is kind of lazily flipping through the TV channels and passes by the local news channel. There is a brief burst of orange and red on the screen, which I register as a fire happening somewhere, which then disappears when Jesse switches over to the next channel. Something about the image looked oddly familiar though. "Hey Jess, can you switch that back?" I called out to her. The news comes back on, and suddenly I recognize the building in the frame. It's my building, and it's burning. "Holy shit," I say loudly enough for a few people to gaze over to the television. "That's my apartment." The bar kind of gets quiet, and everyone's staring up at the screen now. The screen shows a whole wide shot of the outside of my building. The camera must be set up on the north end of the block, because I recognize a lot of shops on the ground floor. Property management, dry cleaners, convenient mart, etc. The top left corner of the building is in flame. It's not a huge fire by any means, but it looks like a few units between the top 4 floors or so have already been engulfed by the flames. "Jesus, man," one of my coworkers says. That sucks." There's another uncomfortable murmur of agreement that passes around the table. I mean, I don't blame them. I wouldn't know what to say in that situation either. "Yep," I agree, just as awkwardly. Thankfully, my apartment is only halfway up and located on the west side of the building. I cross my fingers, hoping my stuff will be okay. The camera cuts off to a reporter at the scene. He's standing a little further away. Looking at the shops in the background, I could tell he's across the street from the northwest corner of the building. "Firefighters are expected to be on the scene any moment," he's saying, "and hopefully they'll be able to contain the horrible inferno before it spreads any further. As I was saying before, it's very fortunate that everyone was able to evacuate the building before things got too bad, or who knows what tragic events may have unfolded." "He's really laying it on thick," my other coworker jokes. I chuckle a bit, and all things considered, at the moment, it didn't really seem all that bad. But then a few minutes later, hang on," the reporter on TV says, We're getting some updated information. It seems... Hang on one moment while we readjust the camera. The previous lockdown camera starts to shift, the angle focusing on the area of the building about halfway up the west side. All the lights in the building are out except for one. I feel a weird creeping sensation as I start counting the windows from the bottom. 5 up, 2 over. That's my place. I swear I turned our lights out. I think at first, then I see it. There's a person standing in my window. The camera is zoomed out too far to make out any features, but it definitely looks like a man, and it's definitely standing in my apartment. I watch petrified as the camera zooms in closer, the reporter babbling on about the overlooked, ill-fated soul still trapped in the blazing such and such. As the image is closer, I start to make out the details. The person is dancing or something. I really don't know how to explain. Like, everything he's doing has this bizarre rhythmic quality to it. He starts waving his arms in the air, back and forth, and then he's waving them up and down at the sides. He's banging both the fists on the glass. Then he's waving his arms over his head again. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. He starts jumping up and down, waving his arms over his head like he's trying to get someone's attention from a long distance. But everything is exactly in the same rhythm, over and over again. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. What the fuck? I say with my voice hoarse whisper. And then the camera gets a little closer, and I finally can make out the person's features. It looks almost exactly like me. It's wearing the same exact clothes that I'm wearing now. Clothes I changed into the moment before leaving my apartment earlier. Its face looked almost exactly like mine as well, except for his eyes. His eyes were far too big for a normal person. It also has this almost comical look of horror on its face. I don't even know how to describe it. Imagine if someone were pretending to look scared, but as a joke. It would have almost seemed funny if the circumstances were different, but instead it was just extremely unnerving. No one in the bar is talking now. Everyone fixed to the TV. The person is still swaying and waving around, beating his hands on the glass and jumping in circles. I almost didn't hear the reporter mention the fact that the firefighters have rushed into the building and now are heading to my floor. Oh God, I think, without really understanding what is happening. Please don't go in there. I stare transfixed on the screen. From this angle you can just barely see, not too far behind where the creature was flailing around. Right now it's holding its face in its hands, shaking its head from side to side, as if saying no. Suddenly the door behind it bursts open as, presumably, the firefighters have entered my apartment. The creature stops moving for a second. I see its expression change. The comical look of horror is gone, replaced with a huge smile filled with enormous, pointed teeth. Then the lights go out. We all just sat there staring at the screen as the camera slowly zoomed out from the now dark window. No one says anything as we quietly pay our bill and leave. I went directly to my sister's place across town and asked to stay with her. I told her there was a fire at my apartment, and that's it. When I tried to find footage from the news online later that night, it seemed like they had edited that last part out. I don't know if any of you on the subreddit know what that thing was, but I hope they didn't put out that fire. I hope they let the whole fucking place burn to the ground. As a kid, I lived with a neglectful parent at best. At worst, Dad would turn his screams and fists at me, but I learned quickly how to dodge the worst of it. Mom wasn't much help. She'd just smoke in the kitchen and bitch at him for staying out too late. At the time, we lived basically in the middle of nowhere. Our nearest neighbors were a long walk away for a 6-year-old, and we had trees between us. No one could run for help, but I was a pretty small kid for my age. I learned I could pretty much fit anywhere. The closet, dryer. I think even once I tucked myself under a futon in such a way I could still get some air, but no one could see me. I was a master at hiding, but it wasn't for a good reason. One night, though, I chose to do something different. I could hear it in my dad's yells. He was pissed and about to get violent. Mom wasn't helping either, just piling fuel onto the inferno of flame. So I knew I had to find a good hiding spot. I had gotten the idea a few days before, when I realized the lattice covering, bottom half of our back porch, had a hole in it. Not big enough to fit a full-grown man, most likely, but I could fit my skinny 6-year-old body in there no problem. So wrapping myself in my blanket and grabbing my hippo stuffy, I snuck out my window and ran into the backyard. In the middle of autumn, when it's 40 degrees out and the temperature's steadily dropping, I crawled under my porch, scraping my elbow and getting splinters on my palms, but I fit inside. It was quite spacious compared to my other hiding spots. I couldn't sit up all the way, but I had plenty of room to spread out my limbs. Of course, I was also getting covered in dirt. It rained a few days ago and the mud was still a little wet. I wrapped myself in my blankie the best I could and settled in for the night. But soon, even with my blankie and hippo, my teeth were chattering so hard I could barely breathe. I didn't want to go back inside, knowing that if my dad caught me, I'd be in for the whipping of my life. So I toughed it out. "Honey, are you cold?" Not the voice of my mother, scratchy from all the smoking and screeching she did. It was sweet, like honey. I turned over to see a dim outline of a woman, laying on her stomach next to me. She had a pretty butterfly necklace on, and was just as dirty as I was. I nodded, wondering how long she'd been there without me noticing. The woman crawled forward and wrapped her arms around me, and suddenly I became warm, like I was sitting next to a campfire. I snuggled into her arms, not minding the mud. After all, we were both dirty. "You've gotten so big," the woman said, examining my face. "How old are you now, Alex?" 6. How did I know this woman again? I don't think I did. 6, the woman gasped. "You're all grown up then. I'm so happy." She sighed pleasantly and stroked my hair. I had never felt this cozy in my life. What's your name?" I asked. She smiled. I could hear it in her voice. "I'm Lily. What's your favorite thing to do?" I had to think of it for a second. "I like board games and coloring." Lily chuckled. "Just like me then. Could never get enough of Scrabble. But I guess you're still too young to play that, huh?" I nodded. "I like the tiles. Would you play with me?" I heard Lily sharply inhale. I don't think I can. Your daddy put me under here, and I can't leave. But," she thought for a second, "Alex, can you do me a favor?" Of course. This lady was so nice. Why wouldn't I do her a favor? "When you wake up in the morning, go to the police station. Ask for an officer named Lowell Joyce. Tell him where you can find Lily, okay? Under your porch. He'll come and get me, okay? And then maybe we could play Scrabble." Yippee about the possibility of playing Scrabble to notice Lily's voice caught at the end. I nodded. "I'll do it. We are on the same team, right?" Lily softly laughed. "I'll help you understand the rules. Good night, Alex." When I woke up the next morning, I heard Lily's voice. "Go now. Your dad is gone at work. I'll tell you how to get to the station." Rubbing my eyes, I crawled out from underneath the porch, went into the house to grab my shoes and coat. I shivered in the frosty cold, but I thought Lily was right behind me. After my shoes and coat were on, I started walking. It was long enough to the neighbor's house. I really can't remember how long it took to get to the police station, although I have no idea why no one pulled over to see what the hell a 6-year-old in dirty pajamas was doing walking alongside the road. Lily kept guiding me onward. "Wait, okay? Cross the street now. Turn right here. Keep going. You've almost made it." I nearly collapsed of exhaustion by the time I walked into the police station. The guys out front chatting and having a good time didn't see me until I almost made it to the front desk. "Whoa, kid. You okay?" One of the officers knelt down at my level, eyes wide. I nodded. "I'm okay. Can I talk to Lowell Joyce?" I asked. One of the officers picked me up. "Sure. Just let me get you someplace warm. Holy shit, your lips are blue." I remember quietly scolding the man about watching his language. Shit was a bad word. I was given some warm cocoa and wrapped into a blanket. by the time the man with the graying mustache sat next to me. "Hi, kid. I'm Officer Joyce. What's your name?" he asked. "Alex." I set down the cup and looked at him straight in the eye. "I was told to tell you that Lily is under my back porch. You need to get her out of there so we can play Scrabble." I had never seen a grown man turn pale before. Lots of things were blurred together at this point. I remember being taken back to my house, and there were a lot of police cars and people around. The back porch was surrounded by yellow tape, and someone was taking a black bag away while my dad was in handcuffs. After that, I lived with my grandparents, Sheriff Joyce. I tried to ask them about what happened to Lily, but I always got shut down. I was too young to know. But life got better. A lot better. Grandpa was the best man I could have hoped for in my life. We went out on weekends to go to the movies, where he let me have a giant soda, even though I would have to pee in the middle of the movie. When I asked him if I could drink when I was 13, he let me have a taste of beer. I spat it out and didn't touch it again. He never judged me for my love of art, letting me paint my own bedroom multiple times over the years. I felt safe around him. He never laid a hand on me. My grandmother was amazing too. Over the week, she would homeschool me, along with teaching me things you wouldn't learn in school, such as how to respect others, but also not to take their crap. And cooking, lots of cooking. I could make my own birthday cake by the time I was 12, but I usually just made them for my friends. I got a lot of those after I was free from my dad. When I turned 16, Grandpa took me back to my dad's house. The whole thing was bulldozed over, but I could still see the yellow tape wound around a few trees, faded and torn. We sat together on the back of his truck. He opened a beer and drank half of it before setting it down and grabbing me an orange soda. After I drank it, he told me, "Lily was your mother." Good thing you didn't tell me this as I was swallowing. I likely would have had it coming out of my nose. "My mom?" I questioned, confused. "Your actual mom. The woman who lived with your dad was not your mother." My granddad grabbed another beer. "Lily was my daughter. I loved her so much. But when you were around 6 months old, she vanished." My stomach dropped. "My dad just imprisoned her under the porch?" I asked, and started feeling sick to my stomach. Grandpa took a deep breath before setting his unopened beer down. "That's something I've never been able to understand. Lily told you to find me and that she loved Scrabble?" "Yeah. She kept me warm that night. I probably would have frozen to death if she hadn't been there." I was a stupid kid. Even I knew that. Grandpa went dead quiet before he opened that beer and slammed the whole thing. "Alex, Lily had been dead the whole time she was gone. When we dug her up, she was just bones. Experts confirmed it, and your dad confessed what happened. They had gotten in a fight, and he threw her down the stairs. She broke her neck." He clenched his fist. "I knew he had something to do with her disappearance, but I never had proof until you walked into my station, covered in dirt, and telling me she was under your porch." I was floored. I couldn't breathe. All I could do was shake my head. "But I saw her. She was alive. She had a butterfly necklace." I tailed off when Grandpa pulled out the evidence baggie from his pocket. There was a butterfly necklace, all right, rusty, and parts of the paint chipped off, but I remember it as clearly as I remember Lily's voice. Grandpa took a shaky breath as he passed the bag into my hands. "Lily loved you so much. It's why she stuck around that bastard. You were her whole world. She was constantly taking pictures of you and sending it to us in the mail. Sometimes a mother's love can accomplish things that no human can do." My eyes overflowed with tears as I clutched the necklace to my chest, choking on sobs. I leaned against my grandpa. He held me tight, and I swear I felt a few of his tears land on top of my head. And for just a brief moment, I swear I felt the warm love I felt that night under the porch. I was an orphan growing up. I always supposed that was for the best. My mom didn't want me, then I was probably better off that I wasn't in her care. I don't hate her or my father, whoever and wherever he was. I was just happy to be alive. I still remember the first time I invaded the mind of another living being. I was 6 years old, sitting outside on the sidewalk, when I heard what I can describe as impulses in my head. The impulses were very strong, and though they weren't words, I knew full well what they were focused on. Eating. I glanced about in confusion until I laid eyes on a scrawny cat as it gnawed away on a dead pigeon. I can't believe what was happening, but that was only the beginning. My mind soon became clouded with the influx of thoughts and impulses. It took me a while, but I managed to gain control over whose thoughts I wanted and didn't want to hear. I had mastered the skill by the age of 13 and knew full well what I was doing wasn't natural. To be honest, I felt more than a little guilty when I peeked into little Danny Meadows' mind to see if she liked me as much as I liked her. That guilt turned to gloom when I found out she was crushing on Richard James instead. I would jump in and out of the smartest kids' heads in the classroom during tests, and ended up doing just as well as them without having to study any of the source material. I would catch up on all the gossip around school while being an antisocial outcast stalking the halls. I got to experience my teenage years in ways no one ever has before. I got into one of the better colleges the country has to offer. I aced the exams and had to put in effort only on the written assignments. I finally made a few friends, and for the first time met a girl who was actually generally into me. I made sure to browse her thoughts a few times just to be sure. We started dating, and now, 4 years later, we're engaged. I work in sales and am pretty good at figuring out what clients want and what they're interested in. My gift had gotten me so far in life, and I had grown to love it and everything it offered, until I met him. My friends and I were having drinks one night when I got bored sitting at the bar. I decided to start a game of guess what this person's thinking about. I looked at a woman laughing a little too loudly with a guy who had his hand on her knee. "Oh, please, stop touching me," I guessed, listening in. I was right. She wasn't into the guy at all. In fact, she was thinking about getting home and catching up on her favorite Netflix show. I chuckled at just the right time. My friend had just told a joke that he's been trying to formulate in his mind for hours now. I moved my attention to the guy sitting alone, sipping whiskey. He's thinking about a recent breakup, I bet. Nope, I was wrong this time. He was hoping some girl would notice him and he could get laid for the first time in 6 months. Poor guy. Then I noticed a cheery-looking man sitting in the corner with the prettiest girl in the bar. Oh, this guy's thinking about what he's gonna do to her tonight. Well, I wasn't wrong. Why is this bitch smiling so much? I can't wait to slice her fucking lips off tonight. See how much she'll be smiling then. My eyebrows furrowed. Was he joking? No, he wouldn't be joking within his own mind. I have to go slower this time. Shauna went way too fast. My heartbeat was beginning to increase. Was this literally happening? Was I hearing the beginning of what was going to be a premeditated murder? Oh yeah, your blood is going to run down the bath drain tonight. And I know you're being nosy over there, Dylan. What the fuck? Yes, I know. You can keep a secret, right, man? At this, the man turned and looked directly at me, still grinning. He inclined his head and toasted me. Hey guys, I just remembered. Stacy is expecting me home before 12. I'll text you guys when I get home, alright? I hurried out of the bar and got into my car. As I sat hyperventilating, sweat pouring down my face, I noticed movement outside my car. Glancing out the window, I saw the man from the bar, helping support the pretty woman, who seemed to be more than a little tipsy. As he opened the passenger door for her to get in, I heard him again, even though he wasn't looking at me. See you later, bud. No, I didn't leave her to die, guys. Just because I'm a trespasser of thoughts doesn't mean I'm a complete monster. Though I was surprised, confused, and terrified, I still knew that I couldn't let this guy, this murderer, get away with it. Though I wasn't completely sure what exactly I was dealing with, I waited till he pulled out of the parking lot in his green Accord before shortly following suit. Even though this guy was going to know what I was doing, I knew I had to enter his mind again. I needed to find out his true intentions with the girl. I could barely see the back of his head, illuminating every now and again by the streetlights through the back windshield. But this was all I needed. I honed in, only to find nothing. What the hell? This had never happened before. Was I too nervous to focus right now? I turned my attention to the girl, who seemed to be singing animatedly. Her muddled, drunken thoughts were like tangled Christmas lights, but they were there. Then it occurred to me, was this guy blocking me out? I focused on him again. Yes, finally. I found that he had been planning to take her back to his place, the address of which I found easily, given that it was at the front of his mind as he drove. It had suddenly occurred to me that I might want to call the police. I fished my hand into my pocket, grabbed my phone, and quickly dialed 911. "Hello, what's your emergency?" came a calm voice from the other end. I opened my mouth and closed it. What the hell was I supposed to say? I knew a guy was about to commit murder because I read his mind. "Sir, what's your emergency?" "Oh yes, there's a man who's trying to hurt a girl." The Accord suddenly sped up and darted through the traffic light just as it was turning red. I slammed on my brakes as the next wave of cars began to roll through from the light change. I was going to lose him, but I still knew the address. "Yes, ma'am, there's a man hurting a woman on 223 Cherry Blossom Lane. Please hurry. He's already killed someone before." "We're dispatching a unit now. What's a good callback number for you, sir?" I responded to the rest of the emergency questions before the light changed, and I turned on my GPS. I knew I had to stop this asshole. I must admit, was more than curious as to who the hell he was. I thought I was the only person in the world that could do it since I was 6 years old. The fact that this man could as well, and seemed better than me at that, blew my mind. No pun intended. I pulled up to the address in a hurry. There were multiple cars in the driveway. I paid them no mind. Adrenaline was surging through me as I hopped out of the car and made my way to the porch. I glanced to my left at the cars in the driveway. None of them were Hondas. I felt a sinking feeling in my gut as the front door to the house flew open. 3 guys dressed in white shirts and brandishing guns were standing in the doorway. I kept my cool and immediately jumped into their minds. I wasn't welcome here. That much was very clear. These guys were drug dealers and distributors of illegal weapons, and these guys weren't gonna think twice about ending my life. "Who the fuck are you?" one of them spat, his pistol aimed right at my forehead. I had to play it smart. 2 of them were already thinking about grabbing me and taking me inside. "Hey, my bad, man. I'm looking for my friend's house. We're having a party tonight. I must have got the address mixed up." "You know what?" One of the guys stepped forward, his gun at the ready. "This guy looks an awful lot like Victor." Oh shit, who the fuck was Victor? 2 seconds later I knew. He was someone that had bought drugs and at least one weapon from them before. These guys' patience with me had quickly plummeted. I knew I wasn't getting out of this. "Are you related to Victor, man?" "No, like I said, wrong house. I'll just go now." I knew what would happen before it did. The guys bum rushed me and seized my arms and legs. I struggled wildly as they dragged me into the house. "Oh yeah? We're about to find out a lot about you tonight, homie," one of them said, and I literally knew what they had in mind, and I didn't like it one bit. "Fredo, grab the tape, man." That was when I heard sirens. 3 seconds later, 2 police cars pull up into the yard, and 4 cops jump out, their weapons in hand. "We gotta get out of here." The biggest of the guys gave no fuss. He threw the door open and began firing at the officers. One of them was struck and fell to his knees. I ran as the fire was returned. I could hear nothing but the deafening sounds of gunshots and glass breaking. I stumbled into the back part of the house and out the back door. Feeling woozy for some reason, I collapsed on the side of the house and then realized all I could do was hope for the best. A couple more minutes went by and I felt hot blood pouring from my wound on my shoulder. I had been shot. That was the last thing I remembered before passing out. When I woke, there was daylight outside. I was laying in a hospital bed, and my fiancée Stacy was at my side, her big blue eyes full of relief. I could feel the jubilation of her thoughts as she saw me coming to. "What happened?" It was a rhetoric question for me, something that any normal person would ask. But I had already been in her head. I knew that the cops had rushed me in an ambulance to this hospital. I knew that the 3 drug dealers were dead. After Stacy told me everything, I pretended to be surprised. Wow, see, this is what happens when you're in the wrong neighborhood. What were you doing out there, Dylan? You could have been killed. I don't know, babe. I was trying to visit my friend Eric. I trailed off when I saw flowers and candy. Stacy followed my gaze and smiled. Oh yeah, a friend of yours came by and dropped these off for you. Victor, I think he said his name was. He said he wants to have dinner tonight, and you should call him. If they let you go anyways. I felt numb as I reached out and picked up the note that had been left behind on the flowers. See you tonight at Jack's Burger House. Keeping you in my thoughts, Dylan. Call me crazy, but sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. If this Victor guy had been able to find me at the hospital and nearly had me killed by gangsters, then I knew he meant business. I had no option but to meet him at the burger joint. After making sure Stacy would be away from the house and at friends, I don't know where her friends live, thank goodness, I armed myself with pepper spray and an old hunting knife I had acquired a few years back. I dressed all in black to make myself seem more intimidating, and I drove to the restaurant at 8. It was crowded. I scanned the clientele, looking for the guy that was quickly becoming the bane of my existence, but didn't spot him. Maybe he wasn't here yet, or maybe he was playing another game. I sat down at the bar and ordered a whiskey. As I took a sip of my drink, I looked around the room again. You don't feel me, Dylan? I feel you. What the fuck? Feel me? Are you here right now? I responded in a pure thought. I'm in the parking lot, but I'll be inside soon. Order me a vodka tonic, will ya? It's the least you can do. I ordered the drink. The bartender had just finished pouring it when Victor sat down in the stool next to mine. He was in all white, his hair slicked back with gel. It was true. He did look like me, albeit a few years older. He didn't say anything when he sat down. He merely picked up the drink, took a few swallows, then raised it in the air, admiring it. Vinny makes the best drinks in town, hands down. How's your shoulder, Dill? He chuckled and took another sip. Come on, man. First you bring a knife, now you don't want to talk? You're kind of hurting my feelings. Victor sighed. I know those drug dealers. They weren't going to hurt you. I didn't know you were going to call the cops and have them pull up. I don't want to kill you. Wouldn't hurt my own blood, even if I have to. There it was again. Victor seemed to sense my unease and gave me a condescending look. Come on, man. You think we both acquired the gift on our own, out of nature? Like we are fucking X-Men or something? I was 6 when my mom gave birth to you, but we were poor, to say the least. You were an accident, little brother. We couldn't afford to keep you, but Dad taught me everything he knew about our gift. I worked on refining it for years. Do you know how much easier life has been because of it? I knew the bartender was going to ask if we wanted more drinks, so I quickly made a motion indicating that we did. Then I turned my attention back to my brother. So what now? You gonna tell me what you did to that girl from last night? I don't care if we're brothers or not. I don't know you. I just know you are a murderer. I took her home, that's it. I've never killed anyone before in my life. I promise you that. You're lying. Cynthia Hernandez never made it home last night. She hasn't been to work today either. That's why I made sure the cops knew you'd be here, to pick up the guy that was last seen with her. Victor's eyes narrowed as the front door swung open. He looked at me, rage in his eyes. The fuck? How did you? I'm pretty good with my mind too, I smiled, and one of the officers placed his hand on his shoulder. Sir, we're gonna need you to come with us. At least that's what he thought was gonna happen. You see, the majority of this little entry actually happened. I figured out my brother's mind rather easily, and I know this would be how he would type his little victory over me, but there was no such thing. I knew that he had informed the cops as soon as he came into the burger joint. He tried to hide it in the very back of his mind, but no one could hide anything from me. No one. I would have just left. He wanted to restrain me and give the police time to get there. That wasn't a problem because I had quite the surprise in the trunk waiting for Dylan in case the situation arose. Stacy got tired and decided not to go to a friend's house after all. I already knew where he lived and decided to take her as insurance in case he didn't want to play nice. So I staged a fight and got us both tossed out of the bar. Once we were away from the public, I socked him in the forehead and knocked him out cold. We could have ruled this world together one day. Oh well. I cut up his girl and threw her pieces into a coffin with him, making extra care to tighten the ropes on wrists and legs before closing it up. I'm a pro at making people disappear, so I knew where to take him. I couldn't bring myself to kill my own brother, so I'll let the solitary tie in the coffin do the job for me. Starvation or suffocation will do the trick. As for now, he's just alone with his thoughts. Help. I'm a single father of one, a 5-year-old little girl, and my daughter has reached the age where she's terrified of the dark. From what I've read, every child goes through it. I know I definitely did, but it's much worse with my daughter. She gets really scared, and in her half-awake state, she gets up and starts looking for her mother in a really panicked manner. Her mother died in a horrible car accident. A drunk driver was racing down the street in a truck and plowed right through her car as she was pulling out of the driveway. This happened a year and 3 days ago, and it was just 3 days ago on the anniversary that everything got worse. As I said, my daughter gets up and goes through the house panicked, but it doesn't always wake me up. So I installed cameras all over the house that sends alerts to my phone if they detect movement. I've gotten used to waking up after having gotten an alert and looking at one of the cameras to see something like her trying to open the back door or climbing onto a chair. When it happens, I simply get up, give her a big hug like her mom always did, and let her sleep with me. It's nothing too hard to handle. It's gone from what feels like forever, and it's basically become a part of my sleep schedule. Now that you have some context, here's what's happening that's starting to freak me out. 3 days ago, the anniversary of my wife's death, I woke up after my phone started buzzing at a decent pace. It was the cameras. The alert happened very fast, and the cameras were triggered and led straight to my daughter's room. So I figured she was just having another episode, and that it's just taken longer to wake up. But there's no way that was the case. There were only alerts leading to my daughter's room. There were none that would suggest that she got up and left the room. The camera in her room hadn't been triggered, and I heard my daughter scream in fear, and I tried to look at the camera as I quickly got out of bed, but it wasn't working. I ran down the hallway and went through her already open door, ready to attack whatever was in her room. There was no one, just my daughter. She was laying in her bed, covers pulled all the way up over her head. I tried to talk her into pulling them down, but she refused, so I eventually stopped asking. I sat down next to her bed and asked her what scared her. She didn't respond. I asked again. She simply said, "There's a monster in my closet." Of course I didn't believe her, but wanting to calm her down, I agreed to inspect the closet. At this point I had completely forgot about the alerts. I guess in the moment I just played it off as malfunctioning equipment and bad timing. I had just started to calm myself down as I approached the closet, but that quickly changed when I heard something in the closet moving. I froze immediately, terrified. What or who is in my daughter's closet and why? What was I going to do when I opened the door? There wasn't time to think, though. I quickly pulled the door open. What I saw wasn't possible. It was my daughter. She had tears going down her cheeks, very frightened. The last thing I remember before waking up in my bed in the morning was her saying, "Daddy, there's a monster under my bed." I thought it was just a terrifying dream. Thought I just imagined all of it. But when I picked up my phone, the alerts were there. I went into the cameras app, selected the DVR, and all the cameras were empty until my daughter's door started to open before the camera cut out. And then me running down the hallway. I almost missed it, but looking at my daughter's camera all the way through, I noticed there was one frame of static. I paused it and instantly regretted it. It was me looking down into the closet, and behind me, on my daughter's bed, it looked like something was standing straight up under the covers of the blankets. I quickly headed out into the living room, and then the kitchen. My daughter wasn't anywhere. I couldn't find her. I've been sitting at my kitchen table for a couple days now. It feels like something is watching me. Like something is just right there. There, just past the corner of your eye. Right where you can't see it. I decided if I was just gonna sit here, I might as well tell someone what happened. Guess what? I just got an alert. The camera in the corner of the room right in front of me just detected motion. There is something behind me. I want to look. I'm gonna click post before looking, just in case. Wish me luck. Back in 2008, I was a student planning to go to university and needed some extracurricular stuff I could put on my entry applications. As most UK students know, one of the best things to have on there is the Duke of Edinburgh Award. As a part of this award, you have to embark on the orienteering expedition, basically a long trek through the woodlands and rural villages following nothing but a map and a compass. No GPS allowed. It's a teamwork experience and you camp and overcome hurdles together. Anyways, I was out of shape at the time, so my uncle volunteered to take me out in the middle of nowhere to get some idea of what it was like. We didn't stay out overnight like what I would have to during the real thing, but we hiked about 10 miles through woods and a small village in pretty abysmal weather. By the end of the journey, we were soaked to the bone and pretty miserable, looking forward to getting back to the car and heading home. For the last part of the journey, we were on a dirt hill heading uphill with bushes and trees on either side. We were marching onward in silence at this point when all of a sudden there was a rustling in the foliage to our left. From behind a large bush stepped an old man in a black suit with a red bow tie and dress shoes. He looked like 70s or early 80s, very pale, liver spots dotting his face with a gray-white comb over. I was instantly weirded out. Who dresses like that to go into the woods? The instant thought seeing a guy his age out there with those clothes in this weather condition was, this guy's lost his marbles. There was something else that took me an extra moment to notice, though, that puzzled me. The guy was bone dry, didn't even have mud on his shoes. We stopped in our tracks and just stared at the man for a moment, who appeared to be frozen and shocked at seeing us. My uncle made the first move, taking a step towards him, asking him if he was alright. The old man continued to stare for a moment, not moving even a twitch, then became suddenly very animated. It was like he suddenly snapped out of a trance. He started flailing his arms wildly, saying something awful had happened, that a good friend of his needed help. He began walking backwards into the woods, motioning for us to follow him, which we did. We started off at a brisk walk, then escalated to running as we were struggling to keep up with the old man. After maybe a minute, he disappeared ahead of us, but we could hear him, so we continued to follow the noises till we reached a huge slope. We stopped at the edge and looked down to see the old man standing there at the bottom, motioning us, pleading with us to follow him. I remember looking down at the slope. It was probably at a 40-degree angle and spanned for perhaps 50 feet or more and slick with mud. It looked like an accident waiting to happen, especially given that there were no shrubs or roots to hold on to or anything. I remember looking down at the old man on the other side of the slope and wondering, how the heck did he cross us so quickly and cleanly? I mean, at that distance, it's hard to see fine detail clearly, but I swear he still did not appear to be wet or muddy at all. Me and my uncle looked at each other, and I saw that he was as weirded out as I was. Despite my feelings, I made a step towards the edge and was going to try to make my way down when my uncle grabbed me firmly by the arm and pulled me back. Underneath his breath, he said, "Something's wrong here." We took a few steps back from the edge at this point, and the old man at the bottom started getting irate. He began pleading with us again to come down the slope. telling us he needed our help. His friend was in trouble. My uncle shouted down to the old man that we would head back to the car and call emergency services for him, that professional help would be on its way soon, that they would have the tools to get him. The old man suddenly got furious, began jumping up and down, demanding we came down the slope right now, or there would be hell to pay. His voice changed drastically. He was practically growling his words, his hands bunched up in fists, pounding his knees like an angry toddler throwing a tantrum. I've never seen a grown adult fly into such a rage in my life. His eyes looked like they were on the verge of bursting out of his sockets. His skin gone from pale to red almost in an instant. We began to hurriedly make our way back the way we came, his demand and threats getting less audible as we got closer to the trail. Once on the trail, we practically power marched the remaining quarter mile or so to the car. All the while, my uncle was on the phone with emergency services, explaining to them that there was possibly a mentally ill man wandering the trail. We were ordered to get to our car and wait for the police so we could show them where we had encountered him. About an hour later, we met 4 officers, 2 whom had dogs with them, and packs of supplies like first aid, emergency blankets, etc. We led them to the exact spot, and then pointed to the 2 officers with dogs in the direction he led us through the bushes. The search lasted all weekend, but there was no trace of the old man. Officers said the only trail they could pick up was mine and my uncle's. They didn't find any footprints or anything belonging to the old man we encountered. One of my weirdest experiences to date.